question for those who were declared missing: what happened to you? I left a home where I was being mistreated, leaving a note that clearly stated my intention to never return. An hour or two later, I received a call from the police station informing me that a missing person report had been filed for me. I explained the circumstances, and they wished me good luck since I was an adult and had the right to leave. That was 3 years ago.
I had an emotional breakdown in 2015 after losing my job, and it was an overall difficult year. So I packed a backpack, got on my motorcycle, and rode to another city to clear my mind. I took enough money to last a week, turned off my phone, and left. I spent the whole week relaxing on the beach, hanging out, going to bars and clubs, and staying in a hostel. I socialized with other guests, and it was an amazing week. I really unwound. When I finally packed up and headed home, I got stopped at an intersection by the police. It turned out that 2 of my former colleagues, whom I had seen after my layoff, got worried about me and came to my house to check in. My housemates told them they hadn't seen me for days. That's when my colleagues started searching for me around the city and eventually reported me as missing to the police. The police had checked my records and phone activity and noticed that I hadn't been active on social media or contacted any family members. While I was trying to escape my tough reality, everyone else was fearing the worst. The police had flagged my motorcycle's license plate, and when I got on the highway, it must have triggered a patrol alert, so they stopped me. The officer was polite. He just wanted to make sure I was okay. He called dispatch to have me removed from the missing persons list. In Australia, a person is only removed from the list once an officer physically verifies their well-being. 8 hours later, I was back home and realized that many people had genuinely worried about me. Honestly, I thought no one would care about my disappearance. Otherwise, I would have definitely left a note.
I work in emergency services, and one day we responded to a call from someone complaining about leg pain. When we arrived, we found a very polite guy sitting by the side of the road with massive blisters on his feet. He explained that he had attended a relative's funeral, felt deeply upset, and decided to go for a walk to clear his mind, which turned into walking for 4 whole days. It turned out that he lived in the same place where he had grown up, 400 kilometers away from where we found him. We talked about his hometown, the good local pubs, and other things. He admitted that he was dealing with some mild depression and might need professional help. Unfortunately, all we could do was take him to the hospital, and we did everything we could. Later, during the same shift, I was scrolling through Facebook and saw that a schoolmate had posted about a missing person. It was our walker. I called the police and informed them of his whereabouts, and they were very relieved.
My brother was listed as a missing person for a whole year. He had disappeared before, but only for a few days. He has paranoid schizophrenia and often suffers from hallucinations. We live in New York, and my parents had no idea where to look for him. For a year, we regularly went to the police to identify bodies. My brother had no friends or a girlfriend he could have gone to. He just vanished. A year later, we got a call from a hospital in Washington. My brother had been found on the street in a very emaciated state. It turned out that he had gone to Washington to warn the government about some perceived threat. Because of his illness, he refused to eat, believing that the food was poisoned. The only reason he survived was that homeless people had looked after him. When he was found, he was unrecognizable and covered in flea bites. Now my brother is physically healthy, although the same can't be said for his mental health. At least he hasn't tried to run away again. Whenever I see homeless people on the street, I always remember this experience.
I went on vacation for 3 weeks. During the second week, my boss called and asked if I was okay because the police had contacted him to inform him that a missing person report had been filed for me. It turned out that my neighbor had filed the report because she was worried she hadn't seen me for a week. I actually found it quite touching.
One of my earliest memories is getting lost when I was 5 years old. My family went on vacation to Scotland and ended up in a remote area where there was almost nothing but forest around us. There wasn't much to do, so my sister and I decided to play hide and seek. I came up with the brilliant idea to hide right across from the front door of the cottage we were staying in, under a huge bush. I watched as my sister searched for me for about 5 minutes before giving up and going inside. but I'm not one to give up easily, so I decided to stay hidden until someone found me. After a short while, about 15 minutes, more and more people started to get involved in the game. My parents were running back and forth, and I watched them, quietly giggling, thinking how clever I was to have hidden so well. Gradually, more people joined the game, other vacationers, park staff, and even the police. I kept sitting in the bushes, hours passed, and it got dark, but I was enjoying the game. My sister, who was only 7 at the time, didn't join the search and just sat on the porch. As darkness fell, my yellow jacket started to stand out, and finally, after an entire day of searching through the forest, my sister spotted me across the way. It was the best game of hide-and-seek of my life.
I don't remember exactly how old we were, probably around 10. My friend and I decided to make some money by collecting fallen leaves from the yards of our neighbors. We went from house to house offering our services for $5. Eventually, we visited so many houses that we ended up at an unfamiliar intersection and realized we didn't know where we were, as we had never left our neighborhood before. It got dark, and we couldn't read the street signs or recognize anything familiar in the dim glow of the streetlights. Finally, as we were wandering aimlessly, we heard the sound of a police siren and saw the lights of a patrol car. The police stopped next to us and asked for our names. They put us in their car and drove us home. To us, as 10-year-old kids, it felt like we were driving forever, even though we only traveled 4 blocks. Oh, we got in so much trouble from our parents for that. They even took away the hard-earned money we had made.
About 10 years ago, I had just moved to California with my ex-partner. Our downstairs neighbor was a crazy drug addict who constantly bothered us and caused drama. One day, a neighbor on our floor started renovating his apartment, and the downstairs neighbor came running up, accusing me of causing the noise and threatening me. It was impossible to reason with her. Every time I left the house, I tried to do so as quietly as possible, worried she might break into our apartment while we were gone. Eventually, I filed an anonymous complaint with the building management and reported her to the police. It turned out she had multiple complaints against her. My husband picked me up from the police station and we went out for lunch, but the building management passed my complaints directly to her. When we came back, she was pounding on our door and yelling. We just left. Forget her. We drove to Walmart, bought a tent and supplies, and headed to Yosemite for the weekend to clear our minds. We managed to sneak back into our apartment, got a bit of sleep, and told a neighbor we were going camping for the weekend. I also texted my mom, brother, and sister, but only my sister received it for some reason. During my last phone call with my mom, I had told her about the downstairs neighbor threatening me, and then I disappeared. We returned after 4 days, and my voicemail was full of desperate messages from my mom and brother. They had contacted the police, fearing the downstairs neighbor had killed us and made masks out of our skin. My mom didn't believe the neighbor who said we had gone camping, thinking he was covering for the other neighbor because her daughter never liked camping. And it was true. This was my first camping trip ever. After 3 days of worry and grief, they finally called my sister to share that they believed I had been killed. My sister laughed and said I was camping. My mom went silent and asked, "What? Why would you think that?" My sister replied, "She texted me, 'Why didn't you call me when you started thinking she was murdered?'" When we got back and I had cell service, I listened to all the messages and immediately called my parents and then the police to cancel the missing person report. Years later, I've tried to joke about it. Remember when you thought the neighbor killed us? But no one laughs yet. I guess it's still too soon.
My favorite story on this topic involves my cousin. He was 4 years old when we were on a family beach vacation. At some point, he just disappeared. We searched for him for hours and even called the police. It turned out that he had walked to a hotel 2 minutes away from the beach to use the bathroom. There, he met some other kids and started playing with them. All the adults assumed he was the child of hotel guests. He even had lunch there when the table was set, while we were ready to hire divers to search for him at the bottom of the sea.
I checked into a rehab clinic. I don't know why I didn't tell anyone, but I was an addict and wasn't thinking clearly. My boyfriend, now ex, was the only person who knew about it. About a week in, I got a call from the hospital reception telling me that my mom was harassing them for information about me and claiming that I had been missing for a month. She was exaggerating. Legally, they couldn't disclose my whereabouts, so they asked me to call my mom and explain everything. When I got out of the clinic, I saw messages from numerous people asking if I was alive. Even my former co-workers had reached out. It turned out my best friend and brother had tried to contact my ex-boyfriend, but he ignored them and didn't tell me that they were looking for me. If he had told me, I would have asked him to let them know where I was, and all this panic could have been avoided. I felt so embarrassed for making so many people worry unnecessarily.
When I was about 6 years old, my family was on vacation in Yosemite. We stayed at a small tent campground, and there I met a boy who was a bit older than me. Together, we set off to explore the area and wandered too far, eventually coming across a bear cub in the woods. We just stood there staring at each other for a few minutes before we each went our separate ways. When we got back to the camp, we discovered that park rangers had already started searching for us, and my parents were frantic with worry. For some reason, my story about meeting the bear cub didn't seem as cool to them as it did to me.
Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new and super interesting discussions.